Welcome to The Real Build. I'm your host, Bill Reiman, your broker builder. And today I got a special guest coming all the way from Beverly Hills, California. Polar opposite from me. I'm all the way here in Florida. She's actually the co-founder, CEO, and the creative force behind the luxury brand Petit Trésor, a brand that is recognized in the baby world by clients she worked for or worked with, like Gwen Stefani, Jennifer Lopez, Victoria Beckham, Madonna, just to name a few. Her distinguished designs can be seen in luxury homes and spaces throughout Beverly Hills. She's been featured in publications and websites, including Wall Street Journal and People magazine. She also worked in the Paris fashion house, Guy Laroche. Nina Takish, it's an honor to have you on The Real Build. Welcome.
Thank you. Thank you, Bill. Thank you for having me.
Yeah, you're actually the first interior designer I'm having on this show. I've really looked forward to this interview with you too,
wow.
because I've seen your work and it's
Thank
pretty
you.
unbelievable. So what I like actually to get started with doing is I want to talk, talk about your background. So let's talk about who is Nina Takish.
Good question. So I was born in Iran and moved as a very young child to Europe with my family. And from there, we decided that palm trees were the way to go, and we ended up in Beverly Hills many years ago. And ever since then, my father's an architect. I had always had a love of architecture. I ended up living both here in Paris. I lived a few years in Buenos Aires and in Argentina. And now I'm back where I grew up. And, that's a little bit about me. I studied, got an MBA, worked, as you know, in Paris for the fashion house Guy Laroche, for Gaston Genet, and had always a fond love and complete obsession with interior design and architecture. So it was only natural that I would fall into what was, in fact, my passion.
Awesome. Yeah, obviously. I mean, with all that experience too, I mean, it's obviously led you to where you're at. And I mean, that's great to hear. And led you to the palm trees. I mean, who doesn't want to be in the
Right.
nice warm weather too? Because it's too cold up north right now, if you ask me. So anyway, so let's discuss your business a little bit. How did the company start, and why did you choose the interior design space? Let's dive deeper into that. What was your reason behind it?
Well, to be honest with you, what I wanted to do initially was design children's nurseries. That was always a passion of mine because I had become a new mom and I found that there really wasn't a niche, someone who curated a nursery, did it from soup to nuts, and did it beautifully, incorporating beautiful materials. At the time, when I started designing nurseries, they were mostly character driven. So you would see, Winnie the Pooh and things like that. And what we did really was, with the birth of the Jennifer Lopez nursery, what we did was really change the dynamic of what is a sophisticated nursery. It really did not exist. And when Jennifer's twin nurseries sort of came out, it changed the dynamic and the industry for everybody. And it became very sophisticated. So it was very exciting to do that kind of work and be able to work with such, wonderful people, celebrities, international clients that we had. And in conjunction with Petit Trésor, which really was a magnificent baby store. And I was always at the same time doing my design work. So I was either remodeling or flipping or building my own house from scratch. And, I remember collecting architectural digests from the time that I was 5. I would grab them from the house that my dad would subscribe to, and I would leaf through them and, keep them in my bookcase. And, it was something that I was always very passionate about. And hence, Nina Takish Designs was created because of this need to expand outside of the nursery. So it was only fitting, and it only seemed natural for me to really expand what was a career in baby into home and interiors and architecture. And it also began with my particular experience of building a house in the recession, which was extremely difficult. It was difficult getting financing. It was difficult getting people to, do the work. And, when the construction division at Citibank calls you and says, I'm sorry, you don't have a construction loan anymore. What do you do?
Yeah.
And it was a passion of mine to get it done. And what I set my mind to, I always accomplish. And that's the same mentality I have with my clients. There's never no. I never say no to a client, whether it be, a small idea or a big idea. Anything is possible, really. Anything can be done, or at least it can be exhausted. And a version of that can be done. So building my house from scratch, I bought land in Beverly Hills at the time, which is, rare and unheard of. You really can't do that anymore. But in '08, when the market crashed, right before it crashed, there was a piece of land just sitting in the middle of, in the middle of the canyons, and I grabbed it, and it had all sorts of building requirements, grandfathered permits, you name it, it happened. And from a very small, flat pad, we built retaining walls, and it took many years to do. And finally, the dream sort of happened, and the vision came through. And that experience in building literally from the ground up and being sort of, obviously I had a contractor and I had a supervisor and all those people, but being extremely involved on a daily level with that project brought, invaluable experience, and having had done other houses as well. But really building from the ground up is a wonderful learning experience, I think, for any interior designer or anyone really who's in that space.
Yeah, and I mean, I actually talk about that a lot as far as me being a real estate broker too. Like me having that the construction experience that I do has helped me with clients too. And I mean, obviously with yourself, watching a house and being involved in that process. And there's not a lot of interior designers, that do that. They should learn, from the ground up how a house is built, because then you see reality and then you can teach these people what is possible. And then in your eyes, like you just said too, I mean, the possibilities are endless with you. You will figure it out because you know what goes into it. That's the thing.
Agreed. You know what's behind the walls. You know what a 2x4 is. You know what kind of piping, whether it's copper, whatever the story is. And when you're designing a house, it's sort of like being a plastic surgeon. You visually you want to make it look good, but you can't make it look good without really understanding the structure. And the structure being the bones of the house or the bones of, one's face. And so it really should come in hand. I think a good designer also has a very good understanding of the laws and, whatever it may be in terms of the new laws that are passed, setback requirements, et cetera. All of that plays into being one of the best, being one of the better designers versus just understanding seeing half the picture.
And that's what puts you above your competition too, which we'll get into a little bit later. But I mean, that's amazing to hear, because it's true though. Not a lot of people take the time to, put in that effort and that and actually learn, the process like you have too. And I really respect that with you too, because I mean, I'm sure your customers do as well. And that's a big promotional, self-promotional piece to you. And that's awesome. That's awesome to hear.
Thank you.
So, I mean, you've worked with, and this is kind of off the record, you've kind of worked with some high-end clientele. I mean, how did you get to that level? I know with the baby business and everything that you had and stuff too. How did you get that business to that level?
To be completely honest, it began literally with Britney Spears. I don't know how else to put it. She sort of put us on the map when many years ago when she had her son, and that's when the paparazzi came out and took pictures of her, coming out of our boutique in West Hollywood, and it just became, almost viral. It became actually viral. And then once they took her, crib out of the store, et cetera. And at the time, women were very worried about exposing themselves as pregnant. They didn't want the industry to know that they were pregnant. And so you didn't really see nurseries. You didn't see women that were pregnant, big celebrities that were pregnant. And so what this kind of did, it sort of opened it sort of changed the dynamic in the industry, where it was okay for women to be pregnant, and it was okay for them to illustrate and give you a peek inside of their house, their home, their nursery. And it became actually something that they started to monetize. And so at the time, there was no monetization of this. We were literally just working, doing the nursery. Brittany walked in. It was that simple. And once her nursery was published, people just went crazy. And that's really when it all began, and it sort of spiraled into that, and it just continued from there. That's really what's happening now in my other, sort of the bigger interior design business, is that once your name is out there, and it's all really word of mouth, it's referrals. You can advertise all you want, but the reality is that it's all client referral, it's all good experience, and it's all repeat customer. So if you do good work and you're passionate about it and you're meticulous and you pay attention to detail and you care, there is no way that you are not going to get wonderful work. And that is what I try and do every day. That's why I don't overload my schedule with clients. I'm not here to make as much money as possible, in a sense, and just overload my agenda and my calendar. That's not what I like to do. What I like to do is give each client and each project my undivided attention. So I will only take about 3 projects at a time, which sometimes is a little bit overwhelming, depending. Some of them are smaller, some of them are bigger, but that is how you really maintain the authenticity of the design versus outsourcing it to too many people. So that's also really important in being able to deliver what you promise.
Yeah, and I'm big on that too, because I actually posted on social media about, it really, and, people roll their eyes when you say it's not about the money, it's about helping people and delivering that top, such a good product, and delivering value and service and communicating and stuff like that. It's rare. I mean, it's rare for people in in a lot of businesses to have that mindset towards it, but when you do, I mean, we're going to make money, but it's playing more of that long-term play too.
Exactly.
And taking the time with the clients. I mean, you could take on a ton of clients and then you're all over the place and you're not really, and that's the thing, you're not really one-on-one with the clients that you have. And I mean, that's the way we are with our building company. We're so meticulous on the details and doing it right and preaching. We're not the cheapest. I mean, but we sell on the quality, and, that's where we got that reputation, for our superior product, but then also playing that long term too with them and constantly communicating after the sale is another big thing too.
Exactly. I mean, you get what you pay for on one hand. If you want, to get an inexpensive designer, you're not going to get the experience, and you're going to run into problems, and you'll end up spending more money. And at the same time, overloading, your roster with too many projects and too many clients at one time ends up being very chaotic, like you said, and you're not really able to successfully finish these projects, A, and B, what you're doing is you're delegating design to, an assistant, a co-designer, let's say, and they might not have the same vision that you do, and things will not turn out the way that you want them to. So again, it really just, things happen naturally. I'm a firm believer in good energy and doing things naturally and not pushing things. And if things are going well the way that they are, I like to keep them that way, and I'd like to sort of respect people's times and be able to fulfill what I've promised. It's important.
Yeah, and that's what you've obviously did, starting where you were too. And I mean, like, just going into the nursery example, I mean, you putting that extra, going above and beyond, that's what caused that chain effect of everybody else seeing your designs. And same with your interior design now too. I mean, it's taking that time with your people, so they're one-on-one with you and not with some assistant that you're going to stick them with. And they're like, who's this person? What happened to Nina?
Who's this junior assistant? I don't know who this is.
Yeah, where's Nina?
It's okay. When you're running errands or when you're picking up memos and samples, and yes, those are wonderful, and you need the help. There's no way to do it, alone. But when it comes to the big vision, when it comes to creating the boards, when it comes to creating the mood and the color schemes, it's your vision. It would be my vision. I wouldn't want that compromise, and I wouldn't want to give the client some subpar design that's done by somebody who's not as seasoned, for example.
Exactly. So let's dive deeper into the process a little bit. I want to talk about how the actual design process is done, because as you know, this is more delivering the value to the consumer, so they know
Exactly.
what to look for. That's why I have you on, because you're such a great
Thank
interior designer.
thank you.
Let's talk about the process. What should potential customers look for when hiring an interior designer?
Well, I always say it's important to find somebody that you're in line with. If you see a designer that specifically does extremely modern houses and you like Tuscan, Mediterranean homes,
Hmm.
I wouldn't reach out to that designer. It doesn't mean that designer can't do it. Of course they can do it. Designers who have the ability, most of the really good designers have the ability to sort of um, transform themselves and see themselves in other spaces and do a good design work. But why push the envelope? Go for somebody whose aesthetic is in line with yours. I
Hmm.
find that the projects that are most successful are people who adhere and are drawn to my particular style. And so find the designer whose work you love. And that's just basic. Don't go by, well, I heard she might be good and I'm not sure, or reading an article if the images of that designer or the aesthetic of that designer is not in tune with you. So that's just very basic.
Hmm.
Two, I always recommend sitting down with the designer, and I never charge for my initial consultation. Why? Because it's a time for me and for the client to interview each other. What they don't realize is that we're interviewing them as much as they're interviewing
Hmm.
us. I always like to make sure that it's a fit, and sometimes it isn't a fit, and I won't take that client because I know ultimately it's not going to work. Why? Because they have different expectations, or they might have different aesthetic that I can't deliver to them. So I don't take a client just to take a client. I take a client who I know I'm going to be able to. And you can tell pretty quickly if you have a good sense, if you have a good sense of people and a good judge of
Hmm.
character. So again, take that opportunity, and most designers won't charge for their initial meeting, to talk to them, see if there's a connection. That's really important. Walk them through the project. See what kind of ideas pop out. A lot of designers hold back. They don't want to give away too much. I always say, look, if you're connecting in that first initial interview, the chances are going to be great that the project will go smoothly.
Hmm.
However you start your project is how the project is going to end. So if you're having a very bad meeting with that particular designer, chances are it's not going to go well. So don't push it.
Hmm. Yeah, I'm big on that too, because there's one thing I actually always talk about too, and us as business people, we aren't meant to work with everybody too, and not everybody's
Exactly.
meant to work with us, and we have to realize that even though we want all the business, I mean that's
Yeah,
just.
again, it's the economy of it. Is it worth it? Is it not worth it? It ends up being
Mm,
not worth it, because if you then have to end the contract in the middle, it's not great for you. It's not great for the client. Just go. A lot of it is instinct, and I think most
mhm,
people undermine their initial instincts. So what I would say to future clients and women and men out there who are looking for designers, go with your gut. If your gut says yes, listen to it.
mhm,
Don't force it, and keep interviewing until you find the right person. Any good designer will not charge you. And if they want to charge you, then maybe that's not the right fit, right? So you should be able to sit down with two, three, four, high end, or, whatever the circumstance warrants, designers, and just get a feel. And designers, because they're in a way artists, they are very different from one another.
mhm,
You're never going to get A, B, C. It's never going to be the same. Each and every designer that I've met, I have friends who are interior designers who are incredible. They all operate their businesses very differently. And so what makes sense to one doesn't make sense to the other. So some designers like to do CAD drawings, for example, and will do full 3D visuals. Some laugh at that and say, I just do a PowerPoint presentation. And others just say, well, listen, I just bring photos and my Pinterest board. So it's what you feel comfortable with. There is no sort of interior design Bible that everyone follows the steps for, like
mhm,
as you would in other fields. And so a lot of it is improvisation. A lot of it is how one designer works and how one communicates, and also a very important thing to ask your potential future designer is what kind of availability they have. How much time can they give you for that project. So
big, yeah.
If you're charging hourly, I understand. It's the hours you're putting into it. But more than that, are they going to be able to come on site? Some designers don't have the capability or time to go on site, especially if they're not in the area. But if they are in the area, how often are they going to be able to go? Why? Because that shows the intent of the designer. It shows the commitment of the designer. I, no matter what, go on to my projects as much as possible.
Mm-hmm.
Client asks me something, they bring in a new artwork. What do you think? I don't want to just see it in video. I don't want to see it on FaceTime. I want to see it personally because I care. I care about what that looks like, and it's going to look vastly different than it does on your phone. So what kind of commitment will they make to you as a client for completing, said project?
Yeah, it's big too. Like it's same building is very comparable. I always just tell people too, do your research. I mean, it's plain and simple. I mean, you're gonna mesh with certain builders, you're gonna mesh with certain designers, but don't. My biggest thing, and that's why I'm doing what I'm doing too with this show, is don't base it on price. That's one of my biggest things because too many people look at the numbers. I think I talk about this with everybody on my show, because I got some high end people that are doing great design and stuff just like yourself, that you're not the less expensive person. You may not be the most expensive, but you're that person that's going to give the right commitment to the client, do the right things and satisfy them, and in the long term too,
Be
be
present.
there
Be
for
present.
them.
Yeah. Being present is although seems so obvious, is not the case. I respond to all of my clients' texts as soon as possible.
Mm-hmm.
Unfortunately,
That's
we're in a
huge.
world where people need immediate attention, and
Mm-hmm.
in design, it's no different. They want a responsive designer. So
Mm-hmm.
ask them, how responsive are they? Some will give you limits and will say, well, I don't respond to clients, after 6 p.m. That's fine. But that might not be your personality. That might not be good enough. And I'm up always late, so I'm always able to respond to clients even late at night. I have some clients that are actually in China, so they'll text me at God knows what hours. And if I've got my phone in my hand, which I normally do, I respond to it immediately. So
Mm-hmm.
that gives a certain sense of calm and relief to the client who needs quick responses. So it also depends on your personality. If you're someone who needs a response quickly because you have anxiety, and believe it or not, people have a lot of anxiety when it comes to interior design because of the fact that they're spending a lot of money and they're redoing a space, and they want to make sure that that it's okay, or if they have a quick question, it should be able to be answered accordingly. And you run into problems. There's
Mm-hmm.
no way around that. You can pretend like everything goes smoothly, but there's always, in every single project I have ever had, you run into problems. And the problems aren't necessarily one person's fault or another person's fault. It's a variety of things that can go wrong. But
Mm-hmm.
it's not a matter of what goes wrong. It's a matter of how do you respond to it. Your response to the problem is the most important thing because there's a solution for it. And people that are reasonable come up with a solution. For instance, there's a patch, you want to move, I had recently a project where we needed to move an electrical switch, something small, but for whatever reason, because the ceilings were extremely high, the 2x4s were a lot closer than they were apart. And so, things don't necessarily fall in line the way you expect them to. And therefore, moving these particular outlets created a whole host of issues. So is that a problem? Yes. Can it be solved? Absolutely. You just
Mm-hmm.
come up with a solution. You get, a smart outlet, or you move it to an entirely different location, or you cap it on one end and whatever. That's just an example. But
Mm-hmm.
how you respond to problems is actually more important than the problem itself.
Yeah, and going off of that too, it's the communication, like you just said. It's constantly communicating throughout the process, being able to answer your phone like yourself, because not a lot of people do that. They'll leave it to the next day, which drives a lot of people nuts, like you
Right.
said, and it's the constant communication throughout. And then by you responding and telling them, so if there is a solution, you're going to figure it out. But if there isn't a solution, it's how you explain, okay, maybe we'll do this instead, and putting that across to them so that they understand that we can solve it's just it's communication.
And especially in construction, I can only imagine it's actually how many problems a day are we going to tackle instead of what are we doing today? Because that's all it is really in construction. And the more experience you have, the better you are able to sort of prevent those, but then when they do come up, be able to find a solution for them.
Exactly.
Cost-effective solution.
Exactly. So, as far as your interior design too, do you welcome client involvement throughout the process?
Yes, very much. I very much do. I'm not a one-sided show here. Sometimes I'd like to be a little pushier than I am, but because I like to really take in what the client wants, ultimately they're the ones who are going to be living in that space or working in that space. So their input is very important to me. And I take it as quickly or as slowly as the client likes. Some designers, have timelines. I have clients that really want to absorb the information. They need to think about it. They need to see part of the design done before we continue with the other part of the designs. And it's not really effective in terms of, moving the project along quickly, but there is something to be said about giving the client the right time to sort of also have their sort of creative moment as well. So client input is very important because also you want to take into account how they live. Do they have animals? Do they not have animals? What is it? And every client is different. Some of them are very meticulous and things have to be absolutely perfect. Others don't see flaws that, are right in front of them. So it's important to know how they live, to see what their lifestyle is. If they're very formal, then you can, use a silk velvet rug. If they're if they want to live a very informal life and they're in a beachy sort of house and they want to go in and out with the sand, then you're not going to give them a silk rug. You're going to do something that's high performance. And so taking those things into account really helps the project, and it also allows the homeowner to have a say. And I have found that 90%, 95% of my clients have a very strong opinion. Rarely do they say, do what you want. Rarely does that happen. That's, a designer's dream. But in most cases, they have a lot of opinions. And you work with that and you steer them away from problems. And I am very honest in that if they're making a mistake, I'll say, listen, I wouldn't do that. And I'll give them the reasons why. And then we'll come to a decision mutually. But since they're going to be living with those pieces, there's no way to not involve them.
See, I'd probably be a designer's dream because I'd let you have at it.
You would? Thank you. Please hire me.
Because I wouldn't know what to do. I'd say, hey, go for it. So make it look
That's
good.
Right. I love those are my favorite projects.
Yeah, that's the way I am. Just make it easy, then I'll move in. So you have said you offer meticulous attention to detail when dealing with clients. So can you explain this and your process a little bit more?
Yes, because I am particular, I'm a Virgo, I don't know.
Me too.
Yeah, unfortunately. So everything's color-coded.
Yeah.
The books are lined up in perfect harmony. Exactly. So I can't help but to be extremely meticulous and detail-oriented because I see everything. So if I walk into a client's house before transformation, of course, I'll see all sorts of things that jump out at me visually, and they bother my eye. I'm very honest, and so I have to do something about that. So we usually do something about that when we're redesigning or designing from scratch, or if it's an open space, that's even better. But meticulous attention to detail means not just looking at the elements with detail, but also really exhausting the options. So a client says, for example, I would like a dining room table, but I'm not sure. Well, we need to find out, what that is. And so the detail is, okay, I'm going to give you different options, different eras, different styles that I recommend with each dining room table works differently with each chair, et cetera, et cetera. So the detail, the devil is in the detail, really. And being organized as a designer, I think is half the battle. You need to know exactly which room, which client, which fabrics, what is happening. And so if you're detail oriented and you're organized, then the project is going to go along very smoothly because you will have everything color coded and organized. And so when it's time to pull the trigger on the entire room, this rug with this curtain with it, everything has to work beautifully together. And so if you're not paying attention to the details, the right trim on a pillow can throw off an entire room. It sounds drastic, but it's true.
Yes.
Or, a trim on a curtain you might have might not work with the sofa. The tone of the sofa might be different from the trim of the curtain, et cetera, et cetera. And so all of these details need to be hashed out in advance before you pull the trigger. And you need to sort of look at them yourself as a designer outside of what the client thinks to make sure that they all work. Is it the right tone? Is it too much cools versus warm tones? What kind of feeling do you get when you walk into a room? A lot of rooms these days are very modern, they're very clean, and they could be very cold. And it's important to sort of, tell the client, I know you love gray, I love gray, I know we love white. I mean, I'm a gray, white, black girl. Everything I have is black and white. But you got to warm it up. You got to warm it up, or else it's going to feel very clinical. And so details means taking into account every detail of everything, basically. Yeah. So it's tricky. It is tricky.
No, and it's huge though too. I mean, with us, like for example, like I'm a big believer in I've used those words too for our company, meticulous detail and design, just because I mean, before we even turn the house over to the client, we are going through marking up every little thing. I mean, I drive my painters nuts because I mean, there's so many. I'll touch all the trim work and all the molding and all the casements around the windows and doors, and if I feel anything, I'll scratch it off. I'll put a piece of tape on it, and because I want it smooth, I'll look at the paint. I mean, it's just so many different things. Like I follow the baseboards. If I see any little nicks or anything, this is stuff people wouldn't even see. Like the homeowner, the homeowner wouldn't even, they'd walk in, would never even notice it, but I notice it. And that's going that above and beyond, like you said. And it stands out to them too. Cause I mean, I've found stuff on granite and that's just little stuff that they're like, oh, I didn't even see that. Or on a cabinet, and we make sure it's done right because we want to be in there. And then we want, after we turn it over, we don't want to keep coming back too. So you want it done right. And that's what that's all about too.
Exactly.
And I love that about your process too. When I read that, I was like, yeah, that's awesome. So going into the construction end of this a little bit, because I've worked with quite a few designers. So we both know how important designers' role is in the build process. I mean, it's huge. You handle so much more than what people think when working with builders too. You truly are the leader of the process, and you have to guide everything from start to finish. What are you personally doing to make the process go smoother with everyone, as far as the architect, the builder, and then to the client? Because I mean, it's huge. I've dealt with designers, like I said, and you are the central person on how everything's going to roll. You communicate with all these different aspects, and I don't think people understand that. So
it's strange, but you're just an interior designer, but next thing you know, you're telling the cabinet maker, the plumber, the electrician,
you're the builder
basically. And it's it can get daunting. But right now, for example, I'm working on a new build construction, and those are my favorite, by the way. What I love is getting a clean slate and starting from nothing. That's my absolute favorite, versus coming in and redesigning something that's been there. But each project has its own ups and downs, but my favorite really is starting from scratch. And what I like to do is, again, be on site, because that's where everything comes to light. I might have an idea about where, sometimes clients will get an electrical sort of specialist, someone with an engineering background to help with the electrical plan. But in most cases, the architect just draws dots on the plan, and voila, there it goes. And then later on, you realize, well, did anyone take into account the lighting for the art, or the statue that is going to frame this entire entrance? No. So those are the things that are really important, and communication with every subcontractor in a project is as important as breathing, I think. So what I do is I become the go-to to all the subcontractors. So even things that are that I don't have that much knowledge about, like home theaters. I can tell you what it should look like, but I don't know the ins and outs of the technical aspects, but they do. What's important to me is to make sure, for instance, that the room that the equipment is housed in is ventilated, right? So otherwise, you're going to have to leave the door open. And if you have a closet with the door open in a house that's, you know, newly built, or a louver door, which is, you know, perforations, that doesn't look good. So we need air conditioning in that room. And who knows that? Believe it or not. In many projects, I'm the one who brings that to light. So we make sure that I go to the AC guy and I said, please bring in ventilation, bring in air conditioning into this particular room. Otherwise, it's going to ruin my design. Why? Because that door is going to have to be open, or the door will have to be a louver door, and that will ruin everything. And these are the things that good designers who have build experience do. They get in a project from the get-go, and they are able to make these decisions that are not costly at the time. It's a lot more expensive to go in afterwards and add, you know, MR16s for particular artwork, or add air conditioning to a room that hasn't even been, you know, set up for it. So it is a very important job to be on site and to be involved on every level. What kind of windows are chosen is very important, because it shows the site level. You know, is it minimal framing? You know, is it minimal casement? Is it heavy? Is it light? What kind of light comes into the house? What kind of views do you have? Those decisions need to be made, and they are not made by subcontractors who are not, that is not their specialty. Their specialty is to install their windows, and they're great at it. I would not be able to do that. But I can tell you what looks better when I'm looking outside of a window. You know, which do I really want to see what I'm looking at, and how do I want to frame this particular, how do I want this to look? How many lights do we want in the actual window? All of those. I mean, there are, people always say, why do you need a designer? Isn't it obvious? No, there are millions of decisions that need to be made, from what kind of crown moldings to what kind of baseboards to what kind of, you know, wood are you using? Is it white oak? Is it red oak? Is it quarter, you know, and it just goes on and on and on and on. That's why it is really important to have someone that you can bounce ideas off of. So if there's a homeowner that's very versed, and some homeowners are actually quite advanced and know what they want, they still need somebody to bounce ideas off of, because there's going to be times where you're just torn between 3 or 4 different concepts or ideas. But to get back to what your initial question was, yes, the designer has to be in communication with all the subs. The designer should be involved from the get-go. For example, when you're doing the kitchen layout, how does one want to cook? Where do you want to have, you know, how does the family live? So the cabinet design is very important, not only aesthetically, but also practically. Is it practical what's happening here? Do they care if they have to walk an extra 2 feet to get to the, you know, whatever, to the refrigerator or the range, et cetera, et cetera. And so it is very important from the get-go for the designer to communicate well with these subs. Hopefully there aren't, you know, issues. Everybody has different personalities. I always approach it with kindness. If you're nice, you get a lot done. You know, going in there and barking at people gets you nowhere. So please, this would be great. I know, and you're giving people extra work, and they get very frustrated. And every trade blames another trade for, I didn't do that, he did that, he did that. There's a lot of that goes on. So if you're documenting everything, and you've got cameras, and you can, you know, express yourself in a nice way and say, listen, this would be really great. The homeowner would really enjoy and would really love if we added, you know, this particular molding here. I know it wasn't in the plans, but can, you know, et cetera, et cetera. And so a lot of it is your style of communication, and it's the way that you approach people. And, you know, again, it goes back to my whole thing about energy. You give good energy. You know, it's Newton's third law, whatever you give is an opposite reaction. And so it's the same thing in design. So if you're good with people, people are good with you, people go out of their way. And if they see that you care, then they care. You see, if you leave people to do whatever they want to do, unfortunately, sometimes, not all, they'll cut certain corners. And it's unfortunate, but you also have to be very vigilant. So, you know, being a vigilante is also, I mean, you're a therapist, you're a supervisor, you are, I mean, I don't even know how many, you're a, you name it, you're
You wear
doing
many hats.
everything. Yeah, you
Yeah.
wear many, many hats. Exactly. Exactly.
Yeah, I mean it's such a big process too, and like you said, the way you come off and the energy you bring, I'm a big believer in that too. I mean, if you come in mad and you're looking angry, they're going to be angry too. You tell them to move a light, they're going to be, aggravated that you told them to move that light. So it's just, but I mean, with you too, and your experience in construction and building something from the ground up too, that's like we talked about earlier, that's definitely helped your cause, because you know what's behind the walls, you know how a led can light can be moved over to a certain place, or how we can add a switch here, or how you can do, so you can communicate that to a subcontractor in a way a lot of other designers can't too, because of your experience and so on. And that's huge for when people and customers are looking for somebody um, to do the design and so on. But that's, I mean, you do drive the process, because I mean, as far as architects, it's, they'll put it on paper, but, and I've always said too, it's just, they should have a course on the job site too, so they could actually, that should be part of the architecture
And they
course.
rarely go to the job site. Architects rarely go to the job site. It's crazy.
Yeah, because
Their
I mean,
baby, they say it's my baby, and I said, "Well, who isn't your baby? Your
yeah,
baby needs
yeah,
some
because I mean,
love."
it looks good to them on paper, but then seeing reality, and then us as a builder too, coming in, and it's reality is different than something that's drawn, and that's where you come in too, because you're so involved in the process, to where, okay, now it's time to make things actually work and mesh together for the client. Like, I mean, the prime example is what you just said. If you got a movie theater and you got a control room with full of electronic equipment with no louvered doors do look a little ugly too.
Unless they're
But
in a barn.
yeah, exactly. So that's awesome, because you do run a lot of it, and I have a lot of respect for designers too that go the extra mile, I should say, and it's not just furniture's going here and they don't really take the time to evaluate everything else. So that's awesome.
Exactly.
That's
So
awesome.
that's the fun part though for me. I enjoy that. When
Hmm.
putting in air conditioning, I want to know what the soffit's going to look like, because the architect never does the sort of the air conditioning plan.
Hmm.
It never works out that way. I've never seen any project exactly have the AC units run the way that the architect's drawn them. And so
Yeah.
you're going to have to cut into certain areas and certain walls. And so these are really big decisions. Am I going to have a short ceiling here in the powder room? Or is it going to be in, the laundry room that's next door? Well, let's put it in the laundry room. And those are the decisions that you can make on site while you're actually doing the work with the trade in place. Otherwise, someone's going to make that decision for you, and they're going to do whatever's easiest to
Hmm.
run the vents. And that might not be aesthetically pleasing. They don't care, because that's not their trade. Again, they're just doing their job. They're putting in their vents. They know that if it goes from A to B, it's the best, the easiest way for that line to run. But the reality is, where are you cutting into, and how are we
Yeah.
going to design the soffits and the moldings, and how's that going to look once it's, the drywall's up. So yeah, it's a lot. It is a tremendous amount of again, back to detail.
Hmm. Yeah. Big
Back to
time.
detail, yeah.
Big time. So, your company, let's go into your company. You've grown pretty fast over the past few years. What are you doing to stand out from the rest of the many interior designers? Because there's a lot of them, just like there's a lot of people in the building industry, and especially since, times are busy, but there's a lot of construction going on too, where I'm at. I always say this too. Everybody kind of with a pickup truck becomes Joe Builder, when times are good. So, what should people take notice of when choosing an interior designer? Because I mean, you've built that brand and you've grown so fast, so if they're looking for somebody, why pick somebody like you over all the rest of them?
It's a daunting task. I do
Hmm.
agree. There are many, many very qualified interior designers out there. I wouldn't know who to choose if I was an interior designer, to be honest with you. So, in my particular case, I like authenticity. I
Hmm.
like somebody who lives who they are. So they're not just, oh, I'll do whatever you want me to. No, I want them to be authentic. I want them to
That's awesome.
really understand. I'm trying to put myself in the position of of a potential, client, and I would want to hire somebody who's really truly themselves. And again, it goes back to authenticity and not pretending to be somebody they're not, and really just sharing their passion. Really, when it comes to interior design, in my opinion, you're either born with it or you're not. You either can do it or you can't. And you can go to the best schools, art schools, you can go to Parsons, you can go anywhere, you can study it ad nauseum. But if you don't have it in your blood, if you don't eat, live, and breathe design, then you're not going to be the best designer out there. And everything that I do is part and parcel. It's literally my world. So if I'm suggesting something to a client, I have thought about that particular idea from every angle. And I live that life, meaning everything to me is about beauty and design. There isn't a square inch in my house, doesn't matter how big or how small, that isn't perfectly designed. I lived in a studio when I was in Paris, and it was the tiniest little thing, but it was just beautiful the way that it was designed. And I made sure that it was like that because that is what brought me happiness. I had a Napoleon sort of, a faux Napoleon, but it was still I think an 18th century desk in there that I got at the flea market with the perfect chair. And because it was open, I had a bed that I threw this wonderful duvet cover on that made it almost look like a couch. And it was just incredibly soft. And it had all these embroideries that complemented the Napoleon desk. My point being, it doesn't matter where you are or what you have, but you have to enjoy and love what you're doing. And that always translates to the client. So the client knows. A lot of times I invite clients to come to my house because I've literally built it, and it was built with a lot of love and pain, to be honest. It was very painful and project for a variety of reasons, because it was, you're building on a hill, you've got retaining walls, you've got to move, you got to get a root hall permit to move, mounds of dirt. And it's difficult. You build, foundation, and your foundations, from a different plan, and all sorts of things can happen. But I invite them to my home so that they can see what I'm about. And your home says a lot about you. I always said, whom I love, always said, it's interesting to see how people live, because how people live is who they are. And I think interviewing a designer, you should try and find out who these people actually are. And those that are authentically themselves, just it exudes from them. You can tell when they get excited about a project. I get excited about the dumbest things, a chair in the living room at the right angle, a brass pendant that's, from Gioponti that's, that I found at a flea market, whatever it is. You can tell if they have passion and they love it. And I love it. I would do this for free. I won't, but I would if I didn't have to. I would do this for free because it's what I love. It's absolutely what I love. And that's really important. Find a designer that loves design and is not just doing it because it's a job.
Yeah, it's with any business too. If you don't love what you're doing, you're not going to be successful at it. Like with me with the building, I love to see the design part of the house. I love to be involved in that. And then I love the best satisfaction to me is seeing the house come to life. From blueprint to finished product, and, being involved in the designer and learning from people and listening to them too. I always do that, and implementing into model homes that we do and so on. It's huge when hiring, like you said, when hiring any company, if they actually have a passion, or if it's some builder that's just throwing up the house because you're going to pay them. Okay. But it's like going back to the detail that we talked about, going above and beyond for those customers, because it's your name on it. That's the thing too. And you with your personal house, that's a show home for you to show exactly how much, and I can tell you're passionate about that project, very passionate, because it's a showcase for you. You went through a lot to get it and build it, and and now you can show it and show what you're capable of doing, which is awesome. And I do, brushing on that too, I do tell people too, I go, if you should drive by a builder's house, and if that house is a wreck, you might want to reconsider. you're
That's
building with that
great,
builder.
great advice.
Yeah,
Yeah.
because I've seen some
Leaking when
builders.
it rains, that's,
Yeah,
what's
yeah,
happening. Exactly.
yeah.
That's
I've seen
great
some
advice.
builders' houses and they look
Exactly.
rough.
Find out what your designers, how is she living? What is the interior of her house
Hmm.
look like? And most designers publish their interiors of where they live because there's been some kind of article written about them. So you can actually see it and you can tell in 2 seconds. Is this somebody who cares about design? Is this somebody who's really good at design? Or is this just a job for them? And so I say, if I were hiring a builder, I would hire you because I
Hmm.
know how much you care. I know how you're going to go to your job site and I love the hand test and the
Yeah.
paint test and all of those things that, not many builders do that.
No.
And that's
Yeah.
important. It's really, really important.
Yeah, and that's another thing with us too, is a completely clean job site, no matter throughout the whole
Oh,
entire
huge.
process. Yeah, and I always tell people too, go look at their jobs when it's like a bomb went off, or it's even with you with designers. If they don't post their house, or if you see their house and it's like a bomb went off, and so, how are you going to rely on those people to build or design your house personally?
Exactly.
You
How
really
much
think?
trash is in the front yard of a construction site?
Yeah.
We could do statistical analysis about that.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. And we're fanatics about keeping everything straight, clean. I mean, we've had, I don't know how many people compliment our
When are you
job
moving to
site.
California to build?
I should, right? So, I mean,
Yeah,
it's just, it's the way you are. I mean, and that just shows how serious you really are about your product and you personally about your design and your brand too. And I mean, it carries. I mean, people do take notice of it, believe it or not. So that's huge. So with you too, I always discuss this, like me and you talked about, meticulous details and everything. I like to talk about quality. I'm big on quality. I'm big on using quality materials. I mean, it may not be the cheapest route to go, but that's what I push for our personal company too. Skimping and cut corners. That's what I've seen a lot of other builders do to try and lower their costs and so on. That's not us. That's how I sell ourselves too. What materials or furniture items or anything you can think of are you using, and how do you stand out from your competition with that?
it's a little different with furniture design, I would say, than building. When
Yeah.
building, yes, you want the best materials. You want the windows that are, the perfect, that are made well. You want,
Hmm.
the right fixtures that are quality fixtures. With with furniture and decorative items, you can definitely go high-low. I have clients who have very, very big budgets, and I have clients that have smaller budgets. And so
Hmm.
I always tell them, don't stress out, okay? Because we can do a mixture. And these are the places where you can do them. And as a designer, that's where you can educate them. You
Hmm.
don't need to spend, $25,000 on a sofa. I mean, it's outrageous, or 15 or 10, whatever. Sofas, once you buy them, they lose their value immediately. So,
Yeah.
it depends on the client, of course, and it depends on what look you're achieving, but you could easily source a vintage piece, have it reupholstered. Some of these couches that were made in the 70s and 80s are built to last longer than
Yeah.
you and I combined.
Yeah.
So and their shapes are actually, we're working with classic shapes. The couch shapes don't really change all that much. And so if you can find a great piece, at a local sort of resale store or at an estate sale. We do a lot of shopping at estate sales where we can get a lot of sort of good deals and then reupholster them in beautiful, I'm talking reupholster them in a beautiful Holly Hunt fabric. But the couch itself is made of wood, and if it's made beautifully, and things were made very well in the past, then you can do that. And so these are sort of the tricks the designer can bring. But I agree with you in that you cannot skimp and scrape on raw materials. Raw materials
Hmm.
you have to use, solid, in my opinion, solid core doors. You could do MDF instead of, solid if you have a budget, constraint. But those are going to be good quality doors. You don't want in a 2 million, 3 million, in LA, walking in a $2-3 million house is an average house. Unfortunately, things are so expensive. But you don't want to walk into a $3 million house and have a cheap door. It just ruins, in my opinion, everything. You need
Hmm.
solid core doors. I have some pet peeves. Another important part where one must not, moldings, you can do MDF. It doesn't have to be solid wood. There's certain places where you can save. because budget, your budget can run, out the door. And I always try and keep clients on budget. And they say, well, what do you mean? And they say, well, do you have a budget? And they'll say, no, I'm going to get the best deal on everything. I'm like, yes, you're going to get the best deal on everything, but you really need to put a budget together so that you understand where you can cut and where you can add and where you need to make changes in your project. And I can help you do that. So it's a play. It's a play. You got to play with numbers, but quality is important. I think, plumbing fixtures are very important. You don't want to change those every 2 minutes. There are a lot of, beautiful designs on eBay that people try and buy, and then within the year they're peeling or breaking.
Yeah.
It's just not worth it. There's some Kohler, for example, makes incredible products at, very good prices, and it's a reputable company. So why not use them versus something that might be 20, 30% cheaper? So
yeah.
There are certain places where you just can't skimp, and a good builder like you can definitely show them where and how and so on.
Yeah, I'm big on that too. Whenever I'm selling our product, I'm walking through. I touch everything, so I can say, "Look, this is a solid wood door," and I knock on
exactly.
it too. Because hollow core drives me nuts too. Because you see it. I mean, down here in the Naples Marco Island area, homes are expensive too, and if you go into a $3 million house and it's hollow core doors, come on, give me a break.
Seriously. The price difference isn't even that much between an MDF and a hollow core door. So why not spend that extra, $100? What is it?
Yeah, I mean, it's per door.
Per door.
Yeah.
That will last you 30 years or so or more.
Exactly. Well, I say, and that's the thing too, is I always open, like with our cabinets, we're doing wood doors. Yeah, you the boxes and stuff, that if they're melamine, but the particle board and so on, I always tell people to look into all this stuff too. I mean, the drawers, dovetail drawers, undermount slides on the drawers that have more, width on them. Make sure they're wood boxes. Make sure there's just things that I always point out. One thing that drives me nuts too, and not a lot of people notice this, is that builders will not change the construction hinges off the doors.
Yes.
They're
there. Might as well leave them, even though it doesn't match the knob.
Yeah, and they're painted. They got white paint.
Like a waste, It seems like, why are we putting these just to take them off? But you got to do it.
Yeah, and we use like M-Tech hardware on all our doors and stuff, and I always tell people, I always say, look at the hinges. We changed the hinge. They kind of look at me like, wait, what? And I go to this other builder. I'm telling you, I guarantee they got sprayed hinges, and it drives me nuts. And then they come back and they're like, you were right. They left the construction hinges on, So.
Those silver ones with the very square edges.
Yeah, exactly. And then it's just the little things too. I mean, like. Here we end up using wood for our baseboard, our baseboard, just because we have to, because it's a moisture, we're in Florida, it's moisture, hurricanes, if water gets in, MDF unfortunately is going to swell up. So
exactly why you are the perfect person to hire, because the things that you can educate them on.
And it's just that's what I always point out to people, because not a lot of people know about these things. And
I didn't know that. There's here it's very dry, unfortunately. We have all these fires, but where you are, it's the polar opposite.
But see, that's the thing. There's a lot of moisture and humidity here, but still there's people using MDF on a base, and then you get one rainstorm and then these slider tracks might get clogged or fill up with water, and then it's coming to your house. That water sits. Boom. Yeah, you're replacing that whole baseboard. So it's the little things like we just talked about. And
there's so many of them. It's the little things.
Yeah, we can go on and on and on, I'm sure, for sure. So let's talk, this one's a big one. Let's talk design trends. What are the current trends, and where do you see design going in the future?
That's a good one. That's a very good one. A lot of people ask me that. They don't want to buy anything that's too trendy and then sort of be, dated, like it was in the 80s with all the pink and the crazy shapes. But it was just on a pure, fixture level. It was chrome, then it was polished nickel, and then it was brass, which is hot now, hot. And then of course now it's turning black. So just the simple sort of trend in terms of hardware. But so it's all cyclical. So if we went to the circle of silver, gold, black, it's going to go back to silver now because people get tired and people want to see new things, and these manufacturers need to make money. So in a way, we're sort of forced to adopt these trends because manufacturers sort of push them on you. It's a matter of economy again. That's why I like to do things that are timeless. They're not necessarily the hottest, trendiest things. I don't believe in doing that. I believe in doing that if it's something that's disposable, a great accent, whether it's a chair or a sofa or whatever. But in reality, what you want to do is keep things classic always, especially when it comes to the bones and structure of the house, because classic architecture has been around, as you know, hundreds of years. We're not going to reinvent architecture, and we shouldn't. We should keep things, and that's what I like to do with my clients, is keep things architecturally correct. So if in a Spanish house they were doing painted tiles only, then we should do terracotta painted tiles as history requires, not all of a sudden bring something else. With that said, that doesn't mean you can't do things that are a little bit different. You do bring in some elements of transitional style, which I do enjoy. But in essence, the main architecture should be accurate. You can't make up your own architecture. So trend-wise, a lot of what you see right now, and it's still going very hot and very strong, is mid-century. I mean, mid-century has been hot now for, I would say, almost a decade, and it's going to continue for a while longer. I think that people want to live a more simplistic life, a little bit more minimalism. And if they have a lot of money, there's going to be a lot of minimalism, but it's still going to be minimal. So the trends, in my opinion, are getting cleaner. The lines are getting cleaner, less fuss, easier materials. The new trends are going to be not the most expensive Calcutta marble because A, they're running out, and B, people are able to achieve these very high-end looks with man-made materials. Whether they're earth-friendly or not is a whole other discussion that we won't even get into, but things are becoming very clean. And as time goes on, I remember when I met with my architect back about 10 years ago or so, I said, I'm torn between building a modern house or a traditional house. I really was torn. And he said, well, hands down, the only houses that sell in Beverly Hills are traditional. 1 out of 10 that sell are modern. Now, if you drive around today, you will see that every other house that's being built is a modern marble. And so, and even in this short amount of time, I would say in the last 8 or 10 years, the trends have changed drastically. So what I predict today could be very different than what my architect sort of predicted, but I'm pretty certain that things are going to get a lot cleaner and a lot more slick and a lot less visible. The minimal kitchen where it doesn't look like a kitchen, that's going to be the newest, hottest trend. So not only are your appliances, the stainless steel, oh, it's so chic, appliances that are everywhere, that's going to be gone. So it's going to be, see if you can find my fridge. It'll be a little, hide and seek going on in places. And that's really what I'm seeing coming out of Milan, the hub of interior and design, furniture design. They do, in my opinion, the best kitchen designs in the world, and you'll see that across Europe, at Pole, for example. Everything is becoming very clean cabinets, minimal lines in the cabinets, flat fronts, right now with black hardware, but it'll probably end up being silver, and then in a few years it'll get back to gold. But another trend that I'm seeing that I love is mixing of your metals. So not everything has to be polished chrome, or not everything has to be polished brass. You can mix them. And how you mix them is what's key. So you can't just mix them and say it's we're on trend, we're mixing our metals. No, you have to know exactly how to mix them. And that's where the designer comes in and says, okay, if you want a black doorknob, then you can have a polished chrome, light fixture, et cetera, et cetera. It really depends on the space. It depends on 100 other variables. But really the trends, in my opinion, are modern, clean, slick. We're bringing back some of the old masters. You'll see a Le Corbusier chair is always going to be one of the best options, and they're sort of remaking them, again. If you go to, Design Within Reach, for example, you'll see sort of those very clean aesthetics that people are bringing in. And then mixing. I still love the mixing of the very traditional architecture with the very, like a Parisian apartment, parquet floors, and then all of a sudden you'll have a Kagan sofa that was designed, I don't know, 80 years ago. And it's still absolutely stunning, absolutely stunning. There's a big push for it now. Everybody wants the curved couch and so on. And so it'll die down a little bit, but something that is beautiful will remain beautiful aesthetically. And so I always tell my clients, buy the pieces that you love. Get that one piece you love instead of 15 things you think you like. And the less, the better. I always say the less, the better. The less, the better. Don't over decorate. That's a big mistake a lot of designers make, in my opinion, is to overdo it. Every wall has got it, or every wall, every area, every corner has a knick-knack. No, get rid of it, because great design is never cluttered. Never.
Yeah, I'm seeing exactly what you said. The cleaner is better.
Cleaner is better, yeah.
Big time. Because, down here where we're at, it's kind of transitioning. I'm seeing a lot more contemporary now, especially in Naples. Marco Island's kind of back behind Naples for some reason in the design kind of thing, because we've been doing a lot of coastal looking homes and old Florida style, kind of beachy homes still, and that design trend's still alive. But I'm seeing a lot more cleaner lines, obviously contemporary. Like we're doing a model home now. It's all contemporary inside, floating cloud ceilings with LED lighting through them, and and then the tier ceiling that goes up, we're doing one of those. So the cabinets are all clean white, and then a brown island. It's pretty cool to actually see. I love it. So and it's funny with me too. Like you said, they all keep circling back. I remember with my dad, and I think it was in the 90s, he took off some brass faucets or something, off his sinks, and
you said, hallelujah, those were awful.
But he kept them, and he goes, oh, one day those are going to come back in style,
Said, no way.
And they did. So I was like, wow. He's like, I told you. I was like, please don't put them back on, so it's just funny how it all recirculates around again.
It does, yes.
So what, as far as you, what elements define your style? So, where do you find your inspiration in your design?
That's a good question. I am driven by what happens a little bit in the world, also through my travels. I think the longer you live, the better you are in terms of your design aesthetic, because the longer you live, the more you've seen. So if you're a world traveler, as I am, I try and go places that I haven't been, and sort of live not just in my own little zip code, but just live throughout the world. I get a lot of inspiration from going to different, especially hotels. I don't know why I love hotels, but I love hotel chic and, all that hotel chic, linen business that became such a big trend, about 10, 15 years ago. So a lot of it comes from travels, but a great majority also comes from being in contact with all the manufacturers. And as a designer, you get all that information automatically sent to you somehow, whether it's by email or catalogs and so on. And so I follow some of the, leading designers on Instagram, like Jean-Louis Degnaud, who is just, in my opinion, one of the best designers in the world right now, who's doing, massive projects in Florida. Actually, he's building these high rises, and it's just incredible stuff. Following them is a great inspiration, and learning from them. And you always have to keep learning. I think design is a process that doesn't end, and you keep trying, you evolve. And I have evolved, what I did maybe 15 years ago, I would never do today. Because I've evolved. I've evolved as a designer, and I think that my aesthetic has become better and stronger. And now I think I'm at a point where, of optimum, I hope. But the idea really is to keep your eyes and ears open and look at the world. A lot of people don't see what's in front of them. So, I go into a space and I look at every little detail. I look at them. I look at what's happening in the corner, what kind of flooring that is, what kind of leather is that? Is that, what is it? What's going on? And I do that with every sort of visual imagery that comes to my mind, whether I'm there physically or whether I see it in photo. And so I study it and I clock it, and it just goes into my sort of visual bank. And I save a lot of images I love. And I have been doing that forever, before even Pinterest and so forth. So I sometimes go through them, and they're still amazing. And they're still amazing. And a lot of what I love and what my sort of design aesthetic is, the traditional good architecture, whether it be modern, and by modern I mean true modern, true mid-century. So you're talking about 50s, 60s designs, architecture. And which people say, well, modern is today. No, modern, modern is really mid-century modern. So, post-war modern, things of that nature. So what I love is great architecture. Referencing the past, I think, is huge. I had a friend who once, really, who's a great designer, and she always said, you must reference the past. You must have visual references. And so was my art teacher. She said, you have to have visual references. Even the greatest artists in the world, if they're painting an apple, they'll have an apple in front of them as a visual reference. So it's really important to do that, and to incorporate what's correct into design, not just make something up. So a lot of it is experience and life.
Yeah, and that's awesome to hear too, because I mean it's taking the time to learn. Like you said, we should be like a sponge, absorb everything you can and possibly can, because not a lot of people are gonna do what you're doing and study and really look into detail, like you said, at the tile and what's, because that right there kind of defines you as a really good interior designer, because you're so meticulous, like we talked about earlier, to where you're seeing these details and that you can pull them all together too. I mean, it's incredible too to hear, and that's what puts you apart from a lot of different people. And you care. I mean, you care
too much.
Yeah.
Literally, my heart stops when I see good design.
Yeah.
And I go crazy, and I have to share it with everybody, and then I'll save the images and I'll look at them again, like a crazy person. I always wonder, like, what is wrong? But you just can't help it.
But that's the difference between you and a lot of other people, and it's rare in business. I've talked with other people on my show about that are in different levels of business, whether they're in air conditioning or they're in I just interviewed somebody in solar energy. I mean, each person has that passion behind a product of how they can do it better, and that's why you get to where you are, and people see it. I mean, and it's unfortunate too that there's a lot of people out there that don't care. I mean, it's about that, the check at the end. And
I always say money comes if you can't concentrate on money. You have to concentrate on what you love, and the money just comes.
Yeah.
And luckily, knock on wood, that's been my case. I don't think about the money. I don't take projects because I think I'm going to make more on one versus the other. I don't. I take projects that excite me, and the money always comes. It always does.
Yeah, spot on right there. Yeah. That's awesome. So one thing too, so what do you find most challenging about designing a home?
The most challenging is dealing with other people. And by that, I mean, you bring in a sub into a project, and they make a mistake, and then you look bad. That happens, and it's very unfortunate, because you just, when you're meticulous like I am, and when you care and you want things to go smoothly, and you bring a sub who says one thing and does another, and then then he questions what you're doing and so forth, and it just becomes difficult. You wish that everybody was as cared as much as you do. And so for me, my biggest issue, I think, is finding my subs to be great subs. And it's not always that case. And so the good ones are always booked. They're booked. So if I want that great electrician to come in and put in one chandelier, because if I'm doing just one living room, for example, he's not gonna come for just one chandelier. He's booked, So finding the right, I think, people at the right time to do the job at that moment and do it perfectly is my biggest challenge. So because it reflects, upon you. And if you need to paint, for instance, high lacquer the ceiling of a dining room, there's only 1 or 2 people that I would trust to do that.
Yeah.
And they're booked solid for 6 to 8 months. And so if I need to do it in the concept, we need it done. I can't wait 8 months. You got to bring in somebody else, and you're just praying that it works out. That's the hard part. So I wish that I had a bigger Rolodex of more subs that were as meticulous as I am. But that's unfortunately not always the case.
Yeah, that's hard to find in all areas, actually, too. I mean, we deal with it in the building, and I mean, we have our certain subs. We have really good trim carpenters that, I mean, they do phenomenal work that we've used for years. And I mean, but I don't know how many painters we've gone through it.
That's the worst trade.
I
The
think,
worst trade I've
yeah,
experienced ever is paint.
yeah,
How hard could it be? It's just a gallon and you get it Home
it's,
Depot. I mean, more than
yeah,
me
yeah,
how much paint actually costs, like a
hmm
good painter costs, and how difficult it is. It's one of the most difficult trades out there is paint.
hmm
Nobody really believes me. I
And
tell people that don't believe me, they're like, whatever. So for me to be able to convey that to a client, well, you're going to spend $100,000 painting the interior of your house. They look at me like I'm crazy.
yeah,
No, that's what it costs to paint a
hmm
house this size with the level of detail and attention that you need,
and using
and
quality
the
paint.
amount of trims and moldings and paneling that you have. Because the guys that I hire vacuum the paneling after they paint. Well, they paint, they sand, they vacuum, they paint, they sand, they vacuum, they
Yeah.
patch, they paint. I mean, it goes on and on and on and on for days. And that's what good work is. And you want the best. You want the
hmm
best.
Yeah, I
My
think,
clients want the best, unfortunately. They want the best. So
yeah,
communicating, the cost sometimes for certain subs is also a challenge. But in
yeah,
the end, they get it. In the end, they get it because
hmm
sometimes, they'll spend the money on the most incredible moldings and paneling, and then it'll get ruined by it. They're like, I've got a good painter, don't worry.
yeah,
And they're like, Mina, I should have listened to you. It looks horrible. And then we got to go back in and redo it. And it's the lesson learned for them. But, there are a lot of challenges that you try and, you're trying to educate your client so that they don't make the same mistakes that could be very costly.
yeah, and that's that communication like we talked about ahead of hand too, and telling them, hey, this is what you need to expect, and setting out those expectations too.
And trust,
Yeah,
exactly.
yeah,
They'll
and
trust you if you're, if you're not there to, a lot of people are there to make money off of you. And so you don't know,
hmm
is it really that much? And you say, and they'll trust you because they'll know in many circumstances, I'll say, you don't need to spend that. Don't spend that. So if you're there to really guide them, then they'll trust you, and then they'll say, okay, I trust that this is that expensive because she veered me away from 14 different things that I wanted to spend money on that I really didn't need to, for example.
hmm
So yeah, it's really also a matter of trust
yeah,
and
big
being
time.
honest and being straightforward. And that's how I am with all my clients. I'm very straightforward and very honest. I just, I'm very transparent. Why? Because that's how you gain good customers for many, many years. I'm not there to do a one-off project and make as much money as possible. I'm
Yeah,
there to make sure that if I were doing it, that is how I would do it. So I always put myself in their shoes.
yeah,
I
and
sound like a dream person, don't I?
I'm the same
I don't
way. I
mean to
mean,
sound like that, but I try and be as authentic as I can, and that's really the only way that it works for me. So.
yeah, and it's with the subcontractors too, figuring out who's right, and then you get your line of subs that you have. Thank God we finally found a good painter, and because that is a tough one, but
Yeah.
it's just, yeah, it's the trust. I mean, it's being honest and open with them, telling them everything up front. That's what I personally do because there's a lot required in a building down where I'm at, because of hurricane code. We have some of the strictest codes in the nation. So, I have to let them know what to expect up front. I also do real estate. So if I buy, help them find an empty piece, an empty lot, I give them that expectation at first of, all right, this is going to take some fill, to come in. We only give you this amount in our cost. You're going to have to pay X amount extra. We can use that in a negotiation. So, when I say that to people and say to a seller's agent, they're just like, dirt? What's he talking about, dirt? But I know these things that go into prior to construction. Seawalls here, obviously we're on an island, we have seawalls everywhere, so that's a big expense too. So it's just being open, like we
Being
just
open,
talked
yeah,
about.
exactly.
And that's what gains that trust too. So stemming off of that, like, let's talk a little bit about your customer service, the areas you focus on most. What are some of the things you're doing to create, better focus on customer service? And then branching off of that, let's talk about, the long-term game. So after the sale, after your interior design process is over, they're moved in. How are you maintaining that long-term relationship with your customer also?
All good questions. Um, what was the first question?
It was the customer service. Yeah.
Customer service, yes, thank you. Customer service, fortunately or unfortunately, is inevitable, and it's everything in today's world, because if you're not doing it, somebody else will, and they'll do it better. And people don't like to be hassled. They don't want to have to beg for things to get done. I'm like that. If I want, to change a cabinet door for whatever reason in my home, I want it to be done, and I want it to be done quickly, efficiently, and so on. And so I feel that the clients also deserve that same level of service. So again, it goes back to when they're texting me all hours of the day and night, I respond. Unless I'm sleeping, I do respond right away. So keeping them sort of informed and being sort of ahead of them is, I think, how I like to do it. I try to do that as much as I can. Sometimes it's impossible because there's time constraints and so forth. But if you're ahead of them and you're as worried as they are, if not more, then they're calm. Especially in a nursery where you've got, this is a good example because someone's about to give birth. Mm-hmm. In 9 months, and they usually come to you when they're 6 months pregnant. So you're on a ticking time clock. So I always found that if we preempted them with updates and phone calls prior to them calling us, that it was a lot better. And so customer service is very, very, very important. And so what I like to do is just to try and be ahead of it as much as I possibly can, so that I'm anticipating issues and questions before they do. And then I'll send them, email updates. I'll sometimes send them visual references because, my clients are very sort of savvy and young and so on. They're all on social media, and I'm very much into social media. I understand it. I think it's a wonderful tool. And I use it actually for my business quite a bit, and therefore I'm able to communicate very often, very quickly with my clients. So they'll send me an image and a photograph that they see on Instagram through a direct message, and then I'll respond yay, nay, whatever the story might be. And so we're very much connected. And it's not an office where you have to call and go through an assistant to get to me. Sure, you could do that, but nobody does that. So what they do is they just direct message me through Instagram. That's really one of the best forms of communication, or through chat. Some of my international clients do it through, WeChat, and then my other clients do it through text. So the majority of it is really technology based, and that's really where it's heading. The future of design is also quick and great communication through technology, and it's just becoming a lot more efficient than wasting time making a call, not having the visual references. People are quick, people are fast, and people want to share their visions, problems, whatever, quickly, and that's how I tackle that.
What about as far as the long term, maintaining that long term relationship with them after they move in?
You become very close over time with clients because you spend a very, you spend a solid, sometimes solid year working with them. Usually it takes about a year to complete a project, if not a little bit longer, unless it's one or two rooms, but it's a good year together between the process of meeting them and coming up with design boards and actually doing the work and ordering the furniture and installing, photographing. It does take time. And so you become very close to them.
Mm-hmm.
And then some of them, invite you to their children's parties and things like that because you are a confidant and you've been a therapist and you listen to what's going on in the house and you know a lot about them. And so I naturally have kept up with a lot of my good clients just as friends. And because social media sort of allows you to do that without being intrusive, and they tend to follow me, then they know what's going on in my life. They'll comment, and then we're sort of, then we're very much in contact. And so you don't really lose contact with them, which is nice, unless it's a very private client who's, off the radar. And, I respect that as well.
Yeah. And social media is a huge tool. I mean, because especially like you posting what you're doing in your design content stuff, they're gonna engage with it, and that keeps them engaged and keeps you top of mind too, which is huge.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, and it's interesting because when people thank you for just sharing what you love, it's very it's wonderful in a way because you know that what you're doing. I know as ridiculous as it sounds, it's only design. We're not we're solving world hunger here.
Yeah, but it's rewarding.
People get inspired and they appreciate the time that you are giving them, and then they'll ask you for your advice. And I always, as much as I can, actually 100% of the time, unless I literally cannot, which is impossible, I respond to every single person who engages with me on social media, meaning a direct question or something of that nature, so that they don't feel marginalized in any way just because, you're in, I don't know, in some faraway country and you're 21 and you're a student. Why wouldn't I answer your question? And I get a lot of young people who ask me, how can I get into the business and what can I do? And those are the people that I really love to respond to because I know that's very valuable information. And I want to be able to at least share with them what I know. So, social media is an incredible tool, especially for designers.
Yeah, that's awesome. That's great to hear. Because I mean, I do the same as much as possible. I don't have quite the following you do, but I try and do it as much as possible. I think I had somebody sent me a picture. It was random too. It was a picture of his cabinets, and he said he wants to install a dishwasher. In a certain.
I love that. Isn't that cute?
Yeah.
I love that, and that happens, and it's good to help.
Yeah, and I had to stop him though because he was going to take a hacksaw to the cabinets. And, he's like, "Can I just cut? Yeah, can I just cut through the cabinets?" I said, "No," and I told him what to do: pull the top off. You can separate the box, so on. But it's just, it's helping people, and I mean, and I'm willing to help anybody I can. I've posted about that too. Because especially in real estate and construction and in these industries, it's a big investment. It's one of the biggest investments you're making in your life. And that's why I started this, to try and help people too, because there's not a lot of knowledge out there about it, and finding people like you, that are really passionate about design too. So that's
great that you're doing wonderful. It's a wonderful thing you're doing. And I'm sure that people are actually, just eating, away at it because it's, or they're very thirsty for the information you're providing them, because there's a lot of sort of hidden tricks and information that people don't have access to. I always say, share it, share.
Yeah.
Because it's never going to take away from your work.
Exactly.
The dishwasher you're helping isn't going to be hiring you to change the dishwasher. Why not help him? So, and even if it is a competitor, I welcome all competitors and love all my competition because they're all great in what they do. And there's enough people in the world, I always say, that need design work, or there's enough people in the world that need housing. And so there's no reason to fear competition. I always welcome it. I think competition is great. I think it's great for just the economy in general, and I don't think it's something that should be marginalized in any way. So I always welcome that, and I think helping everybody and coming together as a community of designers is also great. And you always end up winning, I think, when you're doing the right thing. And doing the right thing is to share. in my opinion.
Yeah, and I agree, highly agree, because I mean, you can't be afraid to share what you're doing. You know, I'm sharing what we're doing as a company because there is only one Bill Reiman. There's only one Nina Takish. You have your ability. It's you.
Right.
Yeah, and there
Yeah.
nobody can
Nobody
replace
can be
you.
me.
Yeah,
And
you're
they want
unique.
to,
Yeah,
but that
they
you
can
can't.
try,
You can
but
try, but
yeah,
it
they're
won't
not gonna.
work.
Yeah, they're not
It
gonna.
won't be authentic.
Yeah, they're just not you, and that's the whole
Yeah.
difference right there. So, I mean, most people just ask about your past and so on. I like to ask about, you know, your future. So, whether it's business or life or, you know, where will Nina Takish be in the future? Who will you be? This is a tough one.
That's a good one. Gosh, I don't even know what to say or how to start, but I will be designing to my dying day, whether it's just for myself at one point when nobody wants to have some old lady do their design work in the future, or whether it's just sharing it, you know, with people for free, whatever it is. It'll always be design based, always. I redesigned my room as a child all the time and would photograph it and with my, you know, camera, and it's just who I am, and so that will continue. And I hope to be able to do sometime maybe different projects. Something that I'm very passionate about as well is retail design. So, you know, maybe I'll get a little bit more into sort of hotel or retail design that I also love, because I love public spaces and how people interact with one another in a space that are, you know, beautiful and grand and interesting. Other than solving world hunger, I don't know what I'll be doing. But yeah, the future really is to continue doing what I love doing, and then I let that take me where it needs to. I don't pave the way. Of course, I have, you know, I try and be as successful and as hardworking as I can. I can't help but to work hard. It's just who I am. I love working. I love, you know, going places and learning new things and finding, you know, like going to a builders conference, you know, in Las Vegas that's coming up. I'm sure you might be there. You know, just finding what the new materials are and doing new things, and opportunities just, you know, come to you. I always find that things just happen naturally, and I just expect them to continue that way.
Great answer. So that's awesome. Last question, and I always ask this to everybody: what exactly do people need to look for when hiring an interior designer, and why should they choose Nina Takish Designs as their designer of choice?
Because there's no other option. No.
Yeah.
Okay, so how to choose a designer is the question?
Yeah, what exactly do people need to look for when hiring a designer, and then why should they choose
Why
you?
should they choose? Okay, so they should, the things that they need to do in order to hire a good designer is to do their due diligence. Talk to somebody whose house they've done before. That's a really good way of knowing what happened. So, you know, and it's not wrong to ask for references. Ask for references. Today with social media, you can find out exactly where, you know, what they've done, if they're, you know, advanced in their field, and call a homeowner and ask what their experience was like. So that's one of the things that I would definitely recommend. And then do, again, and trust their instinct, I think is one of the ones that I always like to push, because your instincts are rarely wrong. And why should they choose Nina Takish Designs? Because I care. And because I feel like they're actually getting a really good value. I am not the cheapest designer, but I am by far not the most expensive designer out there. I like to be fair, and I end up giving more than most, I think, in my opinion. I'm sure there are people that are like me, not saying there aren't, but I go over and above. I go over and above, and I want to make sure, to me, if the client is happy, it's the most important feeling, because maybe I have some kind of trauma where I just need everyone to be happy or like me or whatever. It's probably
a good trait.
Some kind of issue I need to deal with my therapist. But the reality is I don't like it when people aren't happy. I just don't like it. And so I will do what I can to make sure that they are, because it actually hurts me when they're upset. I'm like, oh no, she's upset. Like I get really upset. And then my friends are like, who cares? And I'm like, but I care. You know, so it's important to find somebody that cares, because you're inviting them into the most personal space in your life. And your home is your sanctuary. You know, your bedroom is your sanctuary, and someone's designing it for you. It's in a way very intrusive if you think about it. I know every detail of that bedroom that they're going to be lying in, where they make their babies and grow up, and all of the things that happen in the home, and where memories are made. So it's important to find the right designer. And if if they happen to choose someone, me or someone like me, they're better off because of the fact that they have someone that really is listening and cares.
Nina, this has been awesome. So much great information. I really
Thank
appreciate you coming on too. Last thing I want to ask you too, where can people find you? Social media, so on.
Good question. NinaTakesh.com is my website. My Instagram is the same. My name, Nina Takesh, and they can find my projects there through my website, and they can contact me either way.
Awesome. Nina, thank you so much for coming on this episode of The Real Build. I really appreciate it, and I will see you guys on the next episode.